Good morning. So this morning we're celebrating the feast of Christ, the King of the universe. It's a transition between what we call ordinary time, when I wear the green, and Advent, which is next week, when I will don the purple. So just a few points this Sunday, but I think they're very important for the time that we're living in. First is the feast itself. There's a lot of feast days in our church, and the great majority of them are quite ancient. All one has to do is, think of, say, Christmas or Easter, and the billions of Catholics that have celebrated those feasts for over 2,025 years. But that's not the case with this feast. It's actually only 100 years old this Sunday. We celebrate the 100th anniversary. This was back in 1925 that Pope Pius XI inaugurated this feast to combat the secular world, meaning the faithful getting more worldly, and not just the world, but he said the nations of the world, to remind them of Christ's authority and supreme power. And more important than anything was the importance of observing his laws. Now that brings me to point number 2. And that it's a tough one, particularly for Americans, but really for a large majority of the world right now, because we just don't understand or want a king. A large portion of people right now really don't even want law unless it deals with what they want, what suits me, what I agree with. Now you might be sitting here today, seeing you hear that, you're like, no, Father. I want Christ as my king. Okay. I mean, it sounds nice, but do you really want a king? Because if in fact you do, then you are his subject. And you need to obey and agree with all this king says. Because really a kingdom is all about law. And this isn't the type of law that you get to dispute or change. Like, we can do that in America. Not in this kingdom. So I would ask you, what do you not agree with would be the question. And be honest with yourself, because his kingdom is the church. Right? Remember that time in Caesarea Philippi when he said, "Upon you, Peter, I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it." Awesome. I give you the keys that I possess to the kingdom of heaven. What you bind on earth is bound in heaven. What you loose on earth is loosed in heaven. Therefore, the church is speaking for God. So the question then is, that's teaching number 1. Is there a church teaching that you don't follow? Or that you don't believe in? This is where it gets really complicated in the time that we're living in for 2 reasons. Okay, so one is that our culture that all of us now have grown up in and are totally immersed in, the Christian culture, is totally corrupted by subjectivity. Okay, what does that mean? Well, it means this. There are presently about 45,000 different Christian denominations in the world, and they all claim to be speaking on behalf of Christ himself. Now, 44,999 of them will agree that one of them is like the great beast. All right, it's us. 5,000 different voices. So what's happened because of the Protestant Reformation 500 years ago is that we have arrived at a point in Christianity where it is not what Christ teaches, but rather, and we hear it all the time, yeah, but what I believe. Right? You can even belong to a different church and believe what you want to believe in that pew. That's the supreme truth about God, what I believe. Therefore, Christ is my king in the way I want him to be. Not the gospel. It's really quite antichrist. The second problem is that we are conditioned by our culture, which is not ruled by a king. It is ruled by a democracy. We, the people. Now, before I go any further, I am in the U.S. Air Force. I love my country. I come from a line of men that served this country. I would not want to be anything else but an American. But we are not a kingdom. If we don't like something or someone, we change it. And that's who we are at our core. So, our tendency would be like, well, if I don't like something that I heard in the gospel even, or that the church teaches, well, I'll either try to change it, I won't believe it, or I'll just go find another Christian religion that doesn't believe it or teach it, which takes us back to problem number one. In both cases, this is where it lands. Christ and his kingship becomes sort of this mythical character of whatever my mind conceives it to be. Church then is entirely optional. And the one who actually believes in the one and only Catholic and apostolic truth is fanatical, intolerant, and you're downright offensive. And you're going to get that. The mainstream way, however, is, find what fits you. Because that's what Jesus wants. What you want. We're all going to heaven anyway, so no big deal. Let's just not rock the boat. And that, my dear souls, is where the vast majority of believers are right now. And it is a very, very dangerous place to be, because it is simply not and cannot be true. If all of these expressions and opposite viewpoints of the gospel and what Christ teaches are true, then God is insane, as would anybody who holds 45,000 different opinions of himself. I want you to think about that, because we're not saying this enough right now. It's not all true. It's not all salvific, simply put. Now this takes us into point number 3. And this has been going on for a very long time. So we are privileged to be able to look back into history of the last 500 years and see what this viewpoint of Jesus and religion has actually done, especially the last 100, when it seemingly has really taken root. What do I mean by that? Take the church out of the way, and you can believe whatever you want about Jesus and his teaching, which is what happened. Once that happens, you can believe whatever you want about anything, because there is no objective truth. See, for the last 2,000 years, certainly from like the year 600-700 to the Reformation, the truth of Jesus and Christianity governed the rest of the world because everybody believed in it. Prior to that, as testified to by Pontius Pilate, that didn't exist. So I truly believe the man when Jesus is like, anybody who hears the truth hears my voice. And he's like, the truth? What's the truth? Because his answer would have been, Caesar's the truth. And if you don't agree with that truth, we'll just kill you. And they did in the early church, because they wouldn't worship the false gods of Rome. They wouldn't conform to what Caesar wanted, so off with the head. But we don't understand that because we haven't lived it. But we're getting back to it right now. Because once you get God's truth out of the way, and any truth goes, what takes that spot, enthrones itself, is man. And with man, as historically seen before Christ, comes death and destruction. So to the tune of 150 million people killed for ideologies that have created war. Communism, Nazism, fascism. These people have died. And we sit back and we're like, oh, the church. We didn't kill 150 million people. And that's nothing. And I mean nothing compared to the area of life and the errors that we have embraced from 1973 on, when not the church, but the courts decided when life was going to begin. Remember that, everybody? Let this land with you. From 1973 to right now in 2025, 2.7 billion children have died globally. Billion. Reminds me of the book of Isaiah when God says to him, then they knew that my words were kind. Because we're not. So this is not working. And this is where I stopped and I said, what's the answer, Lord? There's only one. And that's that Christ himself, as the real king, needs to do something. We have proven, and hear me, we have proven that we cannot rule ourselves. There is no party, there is no person, and there is no government that is going to fix this, that even wants to turn it around. They don't. At best, the church has only been able to slow the bleed. And if you're not here yet, you will be soon. On our knees. Please, Jesus, help. For we need you now more than ever.